Our week of prospect talk continues as we're talking today to Will Scouch about the other Blue Jacket that just signed his entry-level contract last week. We're talking about Finnish winger Mikael Pyyhtia, and that's coming up today on Locked On Blue Jackets.
Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, of course, your host, Jay Foster. Happy to be here with you. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day or your first watch of the day if you are joining us on YouTube. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and also on YouTube. So if you're not subscribed over there, make sure you go and hit that button so you will never miss an episode. And like I said at the top of the show, we're continuing our prospect chat. So I talked to the weekend with Will Scouch about a couple of the newest Blue Jackets prospects. Yesterday we talked all about Kirill Marchenko and how excited Blue Jackets fans should be to see him in a Blue Jackets jersey next year. Today we're talking about a little bit more of a low-key prospect, but someone that is still doing some very, very cool things over in Finland. So today we're talking about Mikael Pyyhtia. Like I said, big Finnish winger, scored a ton of goals in the Liiga this season and in the playoffs as well. His season is over and he's been rewarded with his entry-level contract. So I'll just get right into my conversation with Will Scouch about that. With Marchenko kind of out of the way and signed, there was another free agent signing a couple of days later that surprised me a little bit more. I wasn't necessarily expecting this guy to sign his ELC yet, and that is Mikael Pyyhtia, Finnish guy who has just been, he was on fire in the Liiga playoffs. I feel like every single time I refreshed Twitter, I was seeing goal. He just red hot. So like, what should we expect from a guy like that?
I remember when I was watching him play for the 2020 draft because he was scoring a lot and had some pretty strong metrics to go with his data. And I was watching him play, and I can't remember who it was that I was watching, and he was on his line. I was watching Samuel Knazko, who was a guy that Columbus drafted in the exact same draft, so they drafted teammates. And Pyyhtia was really interesting. He was a guy who I totally understood why NHL teams didn't have him ranked. Like, I didn't see him on any lists going into the NHL draft, really. I don't even think Central Scouting ranked him in their 100 and whatever it was of European players. I'm pretty sure. I don't think. Yeah, the only thing on Elite Prospects was that Future Considerations had him ranked 220th. Like, he was not on any boards. And I was watching him and I thought about why, because when you see guys that score a lot of points, for me, it's a trigger to say, all right, let's see why. Let's see the reasons why this might be a player that teams don't want to look at. And what I saw of him was just a guy who just shot the puck from literally anywhere on the ice. Like, he wasn't very quick, wasn't very skilled, but holy cow, could he shoot the puck. And he didn't score a ton of goals, but a lot of his assists came off of rebounds and a lot of him being a shooting target and instead making a backdoor pass that you might be able to get away with at the junior level in Finland. And he sort of racked up the points doing that. But I sort of watched him and went, yeah, I mean, if a team really likes him because he can shoot, then I can absolutely see how maybe a team would pick him late in the draft. But I didn't see anything that was so high level where I'm going, okay, this guy could be a huge play driver in the NHL. But then Columbus comes along and does what they do all the time, and they've done this. They did this with Chinikov, right? Like, he's a guy. They just draft a guy who can shoot. Like, that's the thing is that you can work on skating, you can work on whatever, but just the raw, for a 17 or 18-year-old kid, the raw ability to shoot the puck like that, it seems to be somewhat hard to find, or in their view, something that is worth banking on. And so I watched Pyyhtia last year a little bit just because I wanted to see what happens with this kid, because I thought, okay, this is a kid that everybody wrote off. Columbus didn't, and they drafted him in the mid rounds. So let's see what happens. And I still saw some similar stuff. Like, I remember watching him at the World Juniors, and because I was like, okay, it's good that he made the team. I'm really curious to see what he can do at the tournament. And I still saw some of the issues in terms of, generating speed and having some pace in his game and everything. But man, I mean, he still shoots the puck from everywhere. But the fact is, like, he can shoot the puck from everywhere because he can really shoot the puck. So it was a matter of like projecting that to the NHL to see if it actually could work. And I think that when I was, and I didn't see a ton of them this year. I did watch some of the highlights in preparation for this and everything, just to sort of see what was going on. And it does seem like that shot seems to be paying off for him a little bit more. I mean, he's got 21 goals in 56 games this year and has 8 goals in the playoffs. So almost 30 goals in the Liiga this year is nothing to shake your fist at. Like, that's a good year in terms of goal scoring. But I also look at him and still see a guy who he's going to shoot the puck. Like, that's his thing, is going to be shooting. You know, probably right now strikes me as more of a guy that you put out on your power play, maybe third line, you know, offensive leaning third liner that you put out in your first or second unit power play as a shooting threat. You know, I think that there's still a bit of a ways to go in terms of becoming an NHL player, but I do think he could get there. It's not impossible. Like, I'm looking now, it looks like he's going back to the Liiga next year on loan, which is probably what I would do as well if I were Columbus. But at least you have him signed. You know, he can come to camp, then you can send him to Finland and all that, and you get to see what he can do. So I'm really curious to see how he turns out. I mean, I'm looking at his shot map on Instat, and it is still really all over the place. Like, he is shooting from the face-off circle predominantly, a lot coming in off the blue line. Like, I'm not a huge fan of players who get the puck in the offensive zone and the first thing on their mind is, I'm going to put it on net. You know, they'll cross the offensive blue line, and before they even hit the face-off circles, it's on net. And he seems to be doing that quite often. He actually has more, according to this chart, more shot attempts from before the face-off circle down the left wing than he does from right in front of the home plate area in front of the net. So he's a guy who is definitely a volume shooter, a guy who can do it because he has a great shot for sure. But in terms of him relative to a Marchenko, for example, I see a lot more potential as an NHL player day in, day out of Marchenko than I do out of Pyyhtia. But Pyyhtia definitely has a really devastating ability to put the puck in the net. And could that carry him for a ways in the NHL? For sure. Like, there are guys in the NHL who they shoot the puck pretty much first and foremost, and that's their job. But in terms of overall value on a team, seems to be a little bit lower than guys like Marchenko, but he had a great year. Like, that can't be taken away. Like, he had 3 goals last year, and now he's up to almost 30. So a really, really good year. He's rewarded with a good contract from Columbus. I would expect that he's an AHLer before he's an NHLer, like maybe the year after next. He's still really young. Like, I think he's turning 21 this December, right? Yeah, he's turning 21. So you got lots of time, but a little quicker than I expected, for sure, like you said. But a player that I have been curious about for a few years now.
In a minute, I've got more conversation about Pyyhtia with Will Scouch, but first I want to tell you about BetOnline, because if I had put money on which Blue Jackets prospect was going to be signing their ELC this summer, it would not have been Mikael Pyyhtia. I don't know if the odds for that exist on betonline.net, but they sure do have a ton of odds for everything else. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. You can find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball, and, of course, the Stanley Cup playoffs. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. They've got boxing, they've got UFC, they've got your favorite Vegas casino games. If, like me, you are bad at gambling but enjoy an occasional blackjack game, BetOnline.net has you covered there as well. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Once again, that is betonline.net. BetOnline is where the game starts. Yeah, he was very much a guy that, like, because that was the draft year, I think, where we had like first, second, and then 2 fourths, and then 7th, or something like weird.
Something like that, yeah.
And so I remember looking at all of the guys that we drafted, and then I was like, oh, Knazko is a really intriguing prospect. I'm super excited to see kind of how he turns out. But I wasn't sure about Pyyhtia. And then he started just scoring, basically.
Yeah.
At will,
Yeah.
and like I say, some of it is probably a little bit of just the law of averages. If you shoot the puck enough times, it's going to go in the net. But
Sure.
I feel like Columbus has kind of for me, one of the big things in Columbus for the last, maybe 4 or 5 seasons has been goal scoring. They've struggled to score goals, and that's,
Right.
obviously, uh, Patrick Laine picking it up this season. He was a point per game after a disappointing season last season. Oliver Bjorkstrand, who is still, again, might be biased because he plays for the team that I cover, but he is still, I think, one of the most underrated goal scorers in the
Oh
NHL.
yeah.
Like
Mhm.
he had 27 goals this season. Boone Jenner was on pace to hit 30 goals before he got hurt. So there are guys that know how to score, but it does feel a little bit like Columbus is like, right, we've kind of picked everything else. We still need ideally that number one center, which I mean, I still think that Cole Sillinger has potential to be that. Maybe that's over exaggerating his ceiling, but the defensive core I think is there, especially with the addition of Boquist and Bean this last off season. So really, like they needed secondary scoring, secondary shooting.
Mhm.
After Line and Bjorkstrand, there wasn't really anyone on the team that I looked at and was like, "That's a goal scorer." And I think Columbus has kind of done the same thing. And well, it's the fourth round. The chances of someone turning into a legit NHL player after the fourth round feel pretty low. Let's just pick this kid that shoots the puck from literally everywhere and see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally level with that too. And you know what? Like, it is true. If you need goal scoring, sometimes you need to draft goal scorers. And usually those are the guys that I stray away from a little bit, where in terms of where I value guys, the guys who their best talent is at the end of a chain of events. That's generally the ones where I'm going, I'd rather take guys that have other things and then try to help out at the end of the chain of events. And, in reality, I mean, we're watching the NHL playoffs right now. How many playoff goals or how many goals in the NHL in general are shot from, just off of the raw quality of the shooter. There aren't that many goal scorers that really just, they get the puck in open ice and they can, take some time and there's the quality of their shot gets it by a goalie. Like it's usually pre-shot passing, pre-shot skill, rebounds, tips in front, like all these greasy little things. So I kind of devalue those guys, but you still need good shooters, especially on your power play. And I think Pyyhtia could be one of those guys with some development. But again, like you said, fourth round, most of the guys you're going to draft, like doesn't really matter that much. I mean, in 2020, maybe there were a couple of guys here and there where I might have been a little more interested than a guy like Pyyhtia, but you're not. That's kind of nitpicking. Like at that point, I'm looking at a lot of these guys, and there might have been some guys you might want to bet on, but they certainly weren't playing in the Liiga this year, scoring almost 30 goals. So that counts in his favor. And even if he turns out like it's like we were talking about with Marchenko, where have people have these expectations of these prospects and think, oh well, if they're not like steals, quote unquote, then it's not the same. And it's well, look, if Mikael Pyyhtia becomes a maybe third line guy, like a day in day out NHL bottom sixer who can sort of chip in offensively, if that's what a coach wants him to do, but you also put him out on your second power play and he scores 35 points a year and 20 goals and 15 assists and most of them are on the power play, still has value. And for a fourth round pick, that's better than probably most of the guys that'll be drafted after him and maybe even some of them before him. So it's not the end of the world, even if he does sort of be one of those bottom six guys, which I think could be where he ends up. Marchenko, I'm pretty sure he'll be an NHL role player and a pretty good one, but Pyyhtia, I think, will be a bit of a longer burn. See how he goes. Hopefully next year he can sort of round out his game a little bit better while still retaining that shooting talent. And then once he comes over to North America, who knows what he could be. I mean, I feel like he'll get lots of time with the AHL program to sort of get some minutes and get some reps and score some goals down there maybe. And then who knows where he goes from there. But he, I could see an NHL player there for sure, especially one that's more focused on supplementary offense, I guess you could say.
Yeah, if we get 10 to 15 goals out of a fourth round pick like Pyyhtia, like I'm pretty
Yeah,
happy with that.
easy, easy peasy.
Like
Yeah.
they're not all going to be. I think a lot of people look, and obviously we talked about this a little bit when we talk about Marchenko. A lot of people look at guys like, for example, Cam Atkinson, who's a seventh round draft pick, or go even further, Pavel Datsyuk, seventh round draft pick. A lot of people are like, well, why isn't my 7th round draft pick turning into Pavel Datsyuk? And I'm like, there's a reason that's such a big story, you know? But I wonder if the thing about Pyyhtia being, you know, a 10, maybe 15 goal scorer, I think that's about all we can really ask of a guy like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I always in this work think about I set my bar as conservatively as I can and say, all right, like prove me wrong, right? Like
Mm.
the NHL is so hard. We talk about this all the time, like just me and some other scouts or in the Discord server that I have, like everybody, so many people are in there sort of watching junior hockey once in a while, or even some European hockey, and they'll go back to the NHL right away, especially now because there's NHL hockey on all the time, and they go, "Yeah, the NHL is really hard. Like the NHL is unlike pretty much every other hockey league in the world, where the intensity level at both ends is just so constant. The quickness, the proceed the speed with which you need to perceive the game and read what's going on around you. Like there's no other league like it. You don't get the luxury of time very much. So, and for guys that can shoot the puck, like you might be able to get away with that in the NHL because you don't really touch the puck much anyway unless you're shooting it. And if you're shooting it, sure, you just put it on net and you have the talent to score. But I certainly think that yeah, I mean there's a lot of difficulties in the NHL that a lot of players need to sort of overcome. And so I always kind of go into these things going, all right, I could see this player doing X in the NHL. This area of the game they could do well at. And by do well in the NHL, it means like well enough where a coach will continue to play them. You might not get them at this area of the ice, you might not get much at this area and this area and this area, but you can bank on this in this other area. And sometimes that's all you need, but it is really really hard. So my expectations are always sort of like if they make it, great. I can kind of identify the guys that I could see playing a certain role, doing a certain thing in the NHL and getting away with it and having it work. But I always sort of go, yeah, but then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on in an NHL game where it really challenges the best minor league hockey players around. Like there's no guarantees. And it's really, really hard. It can be really hard to anticipate exactly what a player will look like in the NHL just because of how different it is from pretty much every other league.
Yeah, exactly. I had a really interesting conversation with Tony Ferrari just after Kent Johnson made his NHL debut.
Hmm.
We talked a little bit about, and I talked a little bit with Tony about the idea of sending Johnson back to Michigan for a year, letting him be the guy, and then giving him an extra year to develop. And versus the idea of, well, if he's got his ELC signed, he's in Columbus's system, they can basically like kickstart his development. Is that the kind of thing that you could see? Is that the kind of thought process you could see with Pyyhtia? Like, okay, we're going to send him back over to Finland, but now that he's signed his ELC, we can have a say in his training, his development. Like, if we need to bring him back over to North America, we can. Like, is that
For
something
him
that
specific,
you could see with Pyyhtia?
for him specifically, probably not. I think I'd rather have him, back where he's comfortable. He's been with his team in Finland for years. And clearly something happened between last season and this year that really got him ignited, whether that's ice time or what. But the goals weren't coming last year, and they certainly were there this year. I think another year in Finland to sort of say, all right, you've got the scoring down, right? Like you've done that. Like you can do that. We know that. It's just going to be a matter of improving everything else. And having more time and space in Finland on bigger ice to sort of figure that out, I feel like is the more right move for me. And then maybe after the Liiga season finishes next year, he comes over and plays in the AHL, and then you can see how he does there. And then next year, who knows what happens in NHL camp? It's a big change going from European pro to North American pro, even if it's the AHL. And I think that in my view, if you're not totally sure, then you're not sure. So I feel like with Pyyhtia, there are some gaps in his game for sure that still do kind of need to be worked out. Like I'm looking at his shot map, and I don't see very many NHL players with this kind of a shot map scoring a lot of goals. Even though most of his goals are coming from the high danger areas, he's not scoring much from there. So I look at, or he's not shooting much from there, I should say. So I think that if you can sort of work on his gaps still on bigger ice where he's a little more comfortable, he can stay at home. He's only 20. So there, I don't think there's any real rush. So I think another year could help. And if it doesn't, if he still remains one of these sort of trigger men, happy-go-lucky shooter guys, you can still try it over in the American Hockey League from then. But I feel like the plan seems to be send him back, keep him scoring, keep him confident, make sure he knows that this is something, it's not a one-off season that he just had, like a consistent ability to put goals in the net, and just keep on working on the little gaps in his game that probably will withhold him from NHL success for a shooter, but certainly don't hurt. Like there are signs that it won't hurt him long term if he can work through them. And I think at the end of the day, another year in Finland, I don't think really hurts him.
Yeah. Could you see, or I don't know if this is like a thing that happens with NHL prospects. Obviously, it's a lot harder to score goals in the NHL because
Yep.
the goalies are better. Is there a chance, do you think, of him maybe transitioning into kind of an accidental playmaker in terms of he just shoots a lot and other guys clean that up, and so he
Yeah.
turns into not a playmaker? I don't think is quite the right word for it, but like there was a point at the start of this season where everyone was getting twitchy that Patrick Laine was not scoring goals, and then I went
Yeah.
back and looked and realized that's because all of his goals were basically either bouncing off of Boone Jenner on the power play and he was taking the goals,
Yeah.
or it was a rebound that someone else was putting home, and so he was getting a ton of assists from that, and then obviously he started scoring like Patrick Laine scores, and everyone's
Yes.
happy again. But is that like a thing that you could see happening with a guy like Pyyhtia? Is that a thing that
Oh
happens
yeah.
with kids that are obviously elite shooters in quote unquote lesser leagues?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I think that's how he was generating a lot of the production he put up when I was watching him years ago in junior. The pucks weren't necessarily going in, but he was creating rebounds, and that certainly factors in. I just think in terms of projecting that, it's so hard, right? Like, because rebounds are just chaos. Like, it's just you're kind of hoping for a bounce to go your way, which is fine and it can work absolutely. And yeah, like again, the quality of his shot is not in contention whatsoever. So even if a goalie gets on it and saves it, like, yeah, there's no guarantee that the rebounds or anything will be cleared away or won't end up in the back of the net. So it's entirely possible. And I think that that's a benefit of just putting pucks on net. We see teams do that all the time where their strategy, Carolina is a really good example where they kind of pepper from outside and then follow up on strong inside hockey with follow up rebound chances that can put pucks in the net. But they do kind of allow perimeter chances and all that stuff, and it can work. Keep your shots low and just go from there. So that might be an angle that they take for sure, and I do think that factors in to a guy like Puccio's value. It's not just the puck going in the net, but kind of what happens after a goalie saves it, which certainly it's just hard to project and predict that because the NHL is very good defensively. Guys are bigger, they're stronger, they're quicker on pucks. But if you have big, strong guys that can also be quick on pucks in front, guys like Boone Jenner, then yeah, maybe it could work out. But yeah, with Pyyhtia, for me, the big thing is see where he is at X period of time, then see where he is again, then see where he is again, and just one step at a time, right? Like not putting too much expectations on a guy just because he had 30 goals in the Liiga this year. There was a Rangers guy who played for the same team last year, and he had like 40 goals. And I was getting questions all the time about him. Is he going to play in the NHL? Is he going to score? How many goals could he score in the NHL? And it's like, well, I'm seeing him score these goals in the Liga, and there's kind of similar echoes there. I forget. I think it was Lauri Pajuniemi, I think his name is, but he came to the AHL and played there this year, as far I think, and was like a good AHLer. So you don't want to get your expectations up too high just because these guys are scoring a lot of goals. It's more about, well, fill the gaps that are still there. Keep taking your chances, keep doing the thing, and then we'll see where you're at. And then you just keep developing and developing and getting to where you want to be. And I still see a role for an NHL player there, especially with a guy that can shoot like he can. I'm just not sort of like salivating at the idea of him on the Columbus power play in September, right? Like I just don't think that's likely. I think it's more likely he goes back to Finland, has another strong year, maybe not scoring as much, maybe rounding out his offensive game a little bit better, and then who knows? We'll see where he goes from there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely more excited about Marchenko, but I think Pyyhtia could be a sneaky depth option for the Blue
Yeah,
Jackets in
for
maybe
sure.
2 to 3 seasons time. So we have talked before about draft eligible prospects. We've talked about some Columbus prospects. I'm sure I'm gonna come and make you talk to me about some more draft eligible prospects after the lottery next week, and we
Oh
know where Columbus
yeah.
is going to be drafting. But
Yep.
people who have kind of listened to this episode and maybe want to learn a little bit more about prospects, where can they find you and your work?
Absolutely. So my main areas you can find me are on YouTube. So I've got a YouTube channel that has videos coming out all the time, just scouting. There's reports coming out, a couple coming out Monday, Tuesday this week as well. We do live streams every Thursday, but we will do one for the draft lottery on Tuesday this week. Those will be 8 p.m. I don't remember when the draft lottery is, but the details will be on my Twitter page, which is also looks like below my face, at Scouching on Twitter. You can also follow my work at mckeenshockey.com for subscribers. The video team puts a bunch of work together. All my reports are there in written form. All kinds of stuff are available up there. And outside of that, I believe that pretty much covers it. You can subscribe to support me directly on Patreon at patreon.com/scouching, where you'll get perks, data cards, player visualizations, early access to videos, all kinds of extra fun stuff. Or you can do it through YouTube. There's a YouTube membership program as well there if you want. Same perks, same prices, everything. But yeah, Twitter and YouTube, that's the best way to do it for sure.
Awesome. Well, I know that I have been trying to catch as much prospect stuff as I can from basically all of the prospect guys that I know, because this year I'm determined that when Columbus drafts whoever they draft, I'm going to be like, yes, I know all
Yeah,
about him because I've talked to all of these smart people. So thank you once again for coming to talk about Marchenko and Pyyhtia. And yeah, like I said, I'm sure I'll do my best to have you back on the show
of
sometime
course.
soon.
Anytime. Just wait until the Columbus drafts another Igor Chinikov, and then you'll be really, really confused and not know what to do. But we'll do our
What
best
does it
to
mean
help
we
you out.
drafted this guy 12th
Yeah.
overall? It was supposed to
who
go in the triple digits.
who is this kid from rural Kazakhstan? I don't understand what's happening here.
God,
Yarmo does it again.
I wouldn't put it past him. I genuinely
No,
wouldn't.
me neither. Not at all. Not at this point. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jay. This was a pleasure.
You are very welcome. Like I said, thanks for coming to talk to me about it. And that's kind of all I've got for you today. Tomorrow we will be continuing our prospect chat by talking about the draft lottery, which who knows how that's going to go. The draft lottery is tonight at, I believe, 7 Eastern. So tomorrow's episode will be all about that and looking at potentially who the Blue Jackets could pick with their probably two, maybe one, but probably two first-round picks. So that is going to be tomorrow's episode. Thank you all for listening to this episode. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day or your first watch of the day. Locked On Blue Jackets is still and always will be free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter over at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find this podcast at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me over at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And let's cross our fingers for the draft lottery tonight. And until